Today on Quiet Arena Podcast.
That was something that came later through my career of figuring out.
Henry Wynd.
My career ended with a traumatic injury that kept me from pursuing what I really wanted to do.
People look at their past as a prisoner, and I'd rather look at it as my professor.
The value of including other people. Doesn't mean that they're always going to join, but to know that they are able to join means a lot to people. Pressure had just looked differently. What I was used to as an athlete, pressure existing for 90 minutes, hard mentally for me to play because I knew that I wasn't the same athlete that I was like back then.
What do you believe are some of the top things that these athletes are not prepared for when they transition out of the space?
Just like that, it was gone, and I know
He deals with that situation, so it's just 1 year too late.
There are times that I can't see it, bro. It's hey, this shit is hard. And unless you treat it like a workout, it is a mental
The stadium
workout.
is loud, the lights
Unless
are
you
bright,
treat
the
it
crowd is cheering.
Rumor has it, I'm a savage, drop the classic, thinking back.
But every athlete eventually has to answer one question. What happens next? Because when the arena goes quiet, the real game begins. Welcome to Quiet Arena.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is your man, Tony the Tycoon, and welcome to the locker room. Welcome to the Quiet Arena, and I am excited, and you always know that I got to come off and get my guest read off right. So here we go. So today's guest is someone whose work sits right at the intersection of identity, performance, transition, and becoming. Henry Wynd is a former Division II soccer player, a mental performance coach, counselor in training, and senior member success manager at Pro Athlete Community. But his story is not just about soccer. It's about what happens when the athlete identity shifts, when the next chapter starts forming, and when you begin to realize that performance is only one piece of who you are. Through his work with PAC in character coaching and counseling, Henry helps athletes, leaders, and high performers navigate transition, self-knowledge, values, mental health, and the pressure of becoming something new. This conversation is about identity, transition, performance, mental health, and most importantly, learning how to build from who you truly are, not just what you used to do. So Henry, man, I appreciate you being here, brother. Welcome to the Quiet Arena, man. Welcome to the locker room.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. That was a very kind intro. It's funny hearing things like back about yourself, but yeah, thanks for having me, man. Couldn't be more excited to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, you know, it is, man. Like sometimes when, you know, I'm doing speaking engagement stuff and they start talking about all the stuff that we've done, it's like, you know, we're such humble individuals.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh man, like, can we get past this part? Like,
chill.
Hiding from it, but we got to embrace it, man. You've done some amazing things, and I definitely want to dive into it deep. So look, Henry, like your path has moved you through soccer, psychology, leadership, coaching, counseling, athlete community work. I mean, the list goes on and on, man. You're part of the Pro Athlete Community PAC, which is where my brothers and sisters live, your brothers and sisters live, or you and I met. When you look at that full journey, what do you believe that represents to you?
I think, you know, it's funny, like in your intro, you use this word becoming. And that word has been really significant in my life. And when I look, you know, sometimes when you like look back on a body of work or you look back on your journey, there's like these red threads that are there throughout the entire time that you may not have known. That word of becoming is certainly something that's been latent throughout my 20s. I'm 31 now, but it took me a second to realize that every like step along the way was all a process towards who I was becoming. And when you look back to even in college, my career ended with an injury. It was a traumatic injury that kept me from pursuing what I really wanted to do. That was just like step one of who I was really becoming and who I was supposed to be. And every step along that process, whether it was, you know, retail management, leadership development, executive coaching, getting my master's in counseling, whatever it may be, it's all led me to where I am today and who I've been becoming all along. And so I think that that's the word that really anchors that last 10 years or so.
Man, that's amazing, bro. Like, so you spent all of this time after sport figuring out what the next move is. Can you kind of walk us a little bit through that journey of identity exploration?
Absolutely. Yeah. I really lucked into it, to be honest with you. When I was about 19 years old, in the off season, I just needed a job, like my family was one of those families that as soon as you could work, you were working. And I was really grateful for that. And so I've always had a job. I started reffing soccer when I was 12 years old and been working ever since. But when I was in college, I started working for Lululemon, the clothing company. And what was fascinating about it is when I went in for my training, I was assuming just like day one on the job that I was going to learn about, like the clothes and like how to fold them and how to talk to customers. And that was like not what they were about at all. They instead like really sat you down and talked to you about like core values, 1, 5, and 10-year goals for your life. What's the vision that you're creating for the future? And so at 19 years old, even before my soccer career had ended, I was in this like exploration work of what do I really want my life to look like? Not just my day to day, but what do I want my life to look like down the line? And so fortunately, fast forward a couple of years, when I had my injury, I was like surrounded by a group of individuals who were constantly pushing me to figure out what I wanted in my life. And, I said something ironic when I was 19, but it's really true at 31. When I kind of created this vision for myself and in my life, I always said like, when it comes to like what I do, I don't really want anyone to know what I do. I just want them to want me at the table. They value my perspective, my opinions, my questions, my championing of them, my encouragement, whatever it may be. And so, yeah, like when the injury happened at 21, I didn't know what my next step was. All I knew was to continue looking inward. And when it came to a point where I didn't know how to take the next step, I had learned something about myself, I had like uncovered something about myself, I would look to people that had been there and done that. Mentorship was really big to me. There's a guy who I fortunately get to call a coworker now, but he's been one of my biggest mentors and best friends for the last 10 years, a guy by the name of Jake McKenzie. And I remember talking to him at 20, at 25, at 30, and now at 31. And every single step along the way, he's been like pushing me to like look inward, figure out what do I want, who am I really, strip away the titles, strip away like what I do for a living, and who is Henry at the core. And so I've had mentors like that kind of shape all throughout my 20s and now into my 30s that I've been really grateful for. But yeah, like that journey was a long road. It had a lot of stops along the way, but that's been the core of it all.
Man, that's shout out to Jake. Jake is a good dude, man. Yeah. Jake is a good dude. And I know, many people, if you're in the community, you know who Jake is. For those that are watching, if Jake McKenzie, he's one of the leaders in the pro athlete community. But there's a certain group of individuals where I just think God just touched them a little bit more when it comes to empathy and like true caring about others and love. And Jake he's definitely one of those individuals, man. He's always on my stuff. Always like, liking it, sending it out there, pumping me up, man. And honestly, man, I appreciate it because, sometimes you put this stuff out here, you're wondering to see, you want to know if it's impacting people. And, when you have people like Jake that's encouraging you to keep going, man, that's cool, man. So
if I could just gas him up for a second, there's like this thing early on in my career, I started paying attention to like, there are people who are going to say your name in rooms that you're not in.
Yeah.
And that's such an important thing, like sometimes doors are opened for you and sometimes someone else literally goes out of their way to bring you into the space. And Jake has always been that for me in my career. Like I can look back over the last 10 years and say so many of the moves that I've made in my career has had his hands in it somewhere. But, when I think about him as a human being, and I think that this is really important, and this is not just like a story about Jake, but like this is really important for me too. As I grew up, it was really important. I mentioned mentorship early on. Yeah. There's like a group of people in my life, and Jake is one of them, where I look at them and I say that there are certain values that they possess, that every single time I interact with that person, those values are reflected back to me and they challenge me. And something that I can say now, it's wild, but over the last 10 years of my friendship with Jake, like he has always encouraged me to not play it safe, to be really honest, and to be really intentional with the things that I do. And like, no matter what stage of life, or whether we're talking about work or fatherhood or our marriage or whatever it may be, like those are the three things that Jake always reflects back to me. And so I can say like, I'm a better man, I'm a better husband, I'm a better father, I'm a better employee, I'm a better person because I have people like Jake pouring back into me. And that's like a huge piece of encouragement that I have for people who are navigating that identity or that transition space of like, who are you surrounding yourself with?
That's
And what
good.
are they reflecting back to you? What are you learning from those people? What you don't want is a bunch of people who are just like, yeah, bro, I get it. It's so important to have that. But like, if that is as far as it goes, you're not going to really move through that transition well. You're going to have like support, but not necessarily people who are going to move you along. And so I'm really grateful for him. All like every single podcast appearance I've ever been on, I think I've said his name on. And this one is no different. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, man. You know, we always want to give flowers. So many people, you know, want to give flowers to people after they're gone, and not to, you know, somber the mood. But I lost a good buddy this past weekend, my brother Alden Smith, who man, great brother. He and I had many conversations just about life. It's a lot of what you're talking about, like life, mental health, being authentically you, not just being an athlete, how society only sees you as one thing and you fighting the narrative of those type of things. We had all those type of conversations, man. And, you know, unfortunately, he passed away. But the things that we talked about, I'll always remember, similar to how Jake was influential and inspirational to you. That's how Alden was to me as it pertains to how he moved, even in the midst of, you know, the dark things that he had to overcome. We all have those dark moments, and he fought the best that he could. And I'm hopeful that the brother's at peace. But it just reminded me of what Jake has been to you. And then you talked about having certain people in your life. One of the things I talk about is the circle method, right? And in the circle method, you have your inner circle, your middle circle, and your outer circle. In your inner circle, what you're talking about, those are the people that care about your heart, right? They don't care about how many goals you scored in the game, or, you know, hat tricks you had, or how many pancake blocks. None of that matters to them, man. They care about you as the individual. That's your inner circle, man. And you got to make sure that you place the right people in the right circle. And it seems like Jake has been that for you. And so one of the things that you mentioned is you talked about the beginning. I want to go back to the beginning. Yeah. I want to go back before Pac, before all of the coaching and things. When Henry was, you know, still that little Henry playing soccer, right? How did the game shape how you saw yourself then? And how does it kind of still shape you, even though you're not doing it anymore to this day?
Yeah, it was my everything growing up. It was funny. A lot of the work, obviously, a lot of the work that I'm in is all shaped around identity and, you know, your story formation, how you got to where you were. And so I spent a lot of time reflecting on, like, let's say, like, middle school Henry. Like, I was the guy that was, like, wearing his, like, soccer team jacket to school every single day. Like, I was Henry, the soccer player. I remember watching the 2006 World Cup and being, like, completely enamored with the Brazil national team and, like, practicing every single day on my driveway, trying to pull moves that Ronaldinho did, like, on videos and whatnot. Like, it was such an important part of who I was. I was really proud to be a soccer player and what team I made or how I played in the game. Like, I walked into school with my chest like puffed out a little bit more. And, you know, as you get to high school, you have more opportunity for more notoriety. You know, like, I wasn't like a prodigy in middle. No one knew who I was, you know, growing up. But as you get to high school and people start talking about you and colleges start like placing their interest in you, there is like this little bit of pride that comes with it. And so I really learned to identify with that. But I think something that was kind of always there was I recognized that I was not, I wasn't just a standout player, if that makes sense. What really made me stand out on the field was my leadership. I was the guy on the field that like never stopped talking during a game. And still to this day, like whenever I play like men's league, I'm still talking the entire game. I'm always coaching up my teammates around me, communicating a lot. The way I was able to conduct myself on the field was really important to me. And it kind of like taught me that there's always like a game within a game. There's always this thing going on where like the outcome is the outcome. You're going to win the game, you're going to lose the game, but how you conduct yourself and kind of what you learn about yourself in the process, how you respond to situations, whether you develop resilience or not, or whether you succumb to the pressure, like there's so many things to learn within that. And I think that that's something that has stuck with me forever, or at least up until this point. Like I can look back and and say like I really learned that during the soccer years. And then the other thing too, like I remember my very first PAC event that I went to back in 2024. I was listening to a speaker up on stage, and he was a soccer player himself. He played for the Canadian national team, and one of the things he talks about now is whenever he hires former athletes, he always asks about what position you played on the field or on the pitch or on the court, whatever sport you played, because he has the belief that what position you played gives you a little bit of insight into your personality. And so for me, I was a center back in college, and so like my whole job was seeing the whole field. It was like to know how everything works together, be strategic. Like you don't have to be the fastest, but like know how to position yourself and do all of that stuff. And so I would say that that's really stuck with me as well, knowing how things work from a very high level, seeing the strategy like the whole way through. And it was interesting, you know, I after I got injured, I stopped playing for a long time. Part of it was like the physical side of that, but I think the other part of that was like the mental and emotional side of it. It was like hard mentally for me to play because I knew that I wasn't the same athlete that I was like back then. But now I'm back to playing again, and I love it. And it's funny how like I'm 31, and if I knew then what I knew now at 31 of just like how to be a better athlete, how to be a better teammate, how to be all that stuff, like I can only imagine what kind of player I would have been back then. But I think those same lessons that I was learning in middle school, high school of leadership, the game within the game, and just like, like not missing the opportunity to learn something about yourself, regardless of the win or the loss. Like there's always something to be taken away.
For sure. No, I'm with you 1,000%. You know, they always say, man, hindsight is 20/20. They always tell us that, right?
Yeah.
But what I've come to discover is a lot of times, instead of looking at the past, and I'm not saying this is what you're doing, but this is what I've just thinking about conversations that I've had with other people. A lot of times people look at their past as their prisoner, and I'd rather you look at it as my professor, like shifting the perspective and saying, okay, like these are the things that I did. What can I learn from this and use later on to be able to not only help myself as I, move forward into my purpose, but also to help others, right? You take on those lessons, and God allows you to go through those experiences, not just for yourself, but for other people. And obviously that's what you've been able to do as you move and progress into the coaching phase for athletes. But you also, when I mention this name, right? Maryville.
Yeah.
Maryville. I see the smile on the face, man. So you studied psychology and sociology, right? So the question is, at that time, did you already feel pulled toward understanding people, identity, and performance, or did that come later?
People, yes. Identity and performance, no.
Okay.
What was interesting, and this is like a little interesting part of lore for me, when I was in high school, I actually thought that I was going to be a pastor one day.
Oh, wow.
That was kind of like what I thought my career trajectory was going to be. And like speaking to like that leadership, that gift of communication and things of that nature, I've always been really comfortable in that space. And I had a really deep connection with faith then. And I was planning on going to school and like literally studying in like biblical studies or religious study or something in that realm. And it wasn't until my senior year of high school, I had a conversation with my youth pastor at the time. And he basically was like, hey, go to college for anything else. You can always go to seminary after. Like if you really want to do that, you can do that. And so it wasn't until that conversation that I chose to study psychology, because I thought like no matter what I do profession-wise, I'll always be better off learning more about people, the way that they interact with each other, what makes them tick. Like if I can learn more about the human and then the group of humans, I'm always going to be in a better place. And so I went to Maryville studying psychology. And after the first year, my counselor pulled me aside and was like, hey, if you take like 4 more classes, you can double major in sociology. And I was like, all right. And so what was funny is that wasn't part of the plan. And I mentioned like Lululemon earlier. While I was in school, still working at Lululemon, I learned about this area of psychology called IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology, which is basically like the psychology of business, how like businesses work together, how like everything functions together. And because of the work I was doing at Lululemon, I actually went down that path. I really focused a lot on like the performances of business, and I was able to speak to like KPIs and metrics and why things weren't working. There was a lot of leadership development stuff that I learned then, and it really wasn't until my mid to late 20s that I was like, I actually don't really care about business all that much when it comes to like people. It's all about the person for me. And it was funny how like I remember being in my psychology and sociology classes in my undergrad, literally telling my professors, yeah, no, practicing therapy or like coaching is not in my future at all. I remember literally like saying no to that stuff. And it's funny how fast forward like a couple of years that stuff comes back around. And so to answer your question, yeah, it was always about people. It was never about performance or identity. And that was something that came later through my career of figuring out, like, after a while when you're in like leadership positions, you have so many conversations with people and you start to develop this perspective. And my perspective always came back to, who are you really? Do you like this? Do you not like this? Why or why not? What's getting in your way from getting to where you want to go? And throughout my career now at 31, like I always tell people, like my whole like why, if you will, is to help people get where they want to go. And now I do that through coaching, I do that through counseling, and I do that through strategic questions. But there was a period in my life where like helping you get where you want to go looked very different than it does now.
Absolutely. There's an old saying, man, man plans and God laughs, right?
Funny, right?
We're always talking about what we're going to do. Like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Like he switches everything around, and now we're moving in a direction that we never thought that we would. But we find so much fulfillment, you know. So that's a lot of times where, you know, got to just yield to whatever it is that the universe, God, life wants us to do, so that we can find that purpose and that fulfillment to operate in that, rather than what we believe, you know, we wanted to do. Because I can tell you right now, like when I was in high school, talk about being 18, the things that I said I was going to do then versus what I'm doing now, it's totally different, right? It's not even on the same, you know, scale. So I definitely understand that.
I like to think that like if I knew about this at 18, I think I would have been interested in it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's. I mean, again, even through my 20s, like people would talk to me about what's your dream job, or like how do you want to spend your days, and I would tell people over and over and over, if all I could do all day long was to talk to people over like a cup of coffee or a bourbon or whatever it was, and like help them get closer to their goals, that's all I want to do. And what was funny was like back then I was like, that doesn't exist, number one. Number two, like how do you even monetize from that, or like how do you do that? And so it's been funny how that I feel like has been developing throughout my life. But yeah, if 31-year-old Henry was able to talk to 18-year-old Henry and be like, hey, no, like what you get to do every single day is you get to wake up, you get to talk with current and former professional athletes, helping them get where they want to go, removing roadblocks in front of them, I'd be like, hell yeah, sign me up for that. I just didn't know it existed back then. Yeah.
Well, you would have had to go through the journey that you've gone through to be able to be of value to that market, right? So there's a lot of similarities about things that you've gone through that they're going through that you can help them to overcome, right? Like you know what it's like to put your all into something, and the sport doesn't fail you in as much as, you know, your body did. For instance, you had an injury, right? One of the things that I've been studying is I'm really locked in on this. It's called the athlete identity foreclosure, or AIF for short. And so one of the things it talks about are people that have some of the toughest times is through involuntary retirement. That's when the sport gets rid of you, or injury, right? And that's something that you can't control. And so now, how do you reset the purpose and the priority to be able to not to distance yourself from your sport, but how do we leverage those skill sets and transfer that into something different? And seemingly, you know, that's what you've been able to do. So you've had, you know, you talked about Lululemon, you talked about the sports media. You did sports media, I believe, as well, and you were in sports tech. And now you have PAC, which is the athlete community. What did those different environments teach you about people, as well as pressure in transition?
I'll start with Lululemon. I felt like that was my biggest teacher and my foundational work of people. Again, speaking to like core values, which is like the specific set of, I call them like the glasses or the lenses that you see the world through. It's the things that matter most to you. Starting to learn like how people's core values show up in their lives. If something isn't sitting well with them, chances are one of their core values is being stepped on. So like learning how to ask specific questions to reveal what those values are, and when there's a value that feels like out of out of place, how to repair that. But it also taught me a lot of things about accountability, about integrity. I feel like I owe a lot of my my early adulthood development to that, because it also pushed me to learn more about how to bring people together. I mentioned that leadership that I learned on the field as an athlete. I recognized that my voice carried weight, and my ability to bring people in to the circle, to give them a seat at the table, was something that I felt like was one of those God-given abilities, and Lululemon gave me the platform to do that. And so I learned a lot about people in that space, that sometimes people just need an invitation to belong. Yeah. And so I did that over and over and over. And so what was amazing was during that time, again, the value thing, yes, the accountability thing, yes, the integrity thing, yes, but I learned the value of inclusion. And before the conversation of 2020 turned to diversity and inclusion, Lululemon was teaching me inclusion all along the way. And so I feel like I learned the value of including other people. Doesn't mean that they're always going to join, but to know that they are able to join means a lot to people. And so I'd like to say, and other people could probably verify this, that if you've ever met me, if you've ever been around me, you feel safe to just be yourself and to join the conversation, whatever that may look like to you. And so I felt like Lululemon taught me a lot about that. And then it's funny, some of the other stops along the way, the sports tech space that I was in, I worked for Underdog, the sports betting platform. And specifically within that space, I worked with our VIP clientele. These are the people who are betting the most amount of money on our platform, and talking to that kind of clientele and understanding what the rationale is behind throwing $25,000 on France to win the game against Senegal today, completely different perspective than maybe what I had been used to up until that time. But I learned so much about capturing people's attention, about how things can present as really transactional. Hey, I need this from you, I need that from you. But if you can really learn how to crack the core, if you will, I felt like my manager at Underdog was so good at knowing how to see someone that, again, presented transactionally, and knowing how to do a little bit of research on them. Be hey, I noticed that you went to this university, or I noticed that you did this obscure thing in your career. Let's talk about it before we talk about the $25,000 thing. You just build that resonance a lot quicker. And so I learned that from Underdog, and again, the value of just helping people feel included. There's a lot of different options out there when it comes to utilizing those platforms. Why do they want to do it with you? Probably because of the vibe that you create when you're talking to them. So I feel like that taught me a lot about that. And then the pressure that comes along with those kinds of environments, when someone's sweating $25,000 on the line, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, I feel like some of the other career choices that I've had, pressure had just looked differently. I'm used to, and what I was used to as an athlete, pressure existing for soccer, pressure existing for 90 minutes, right? It's a 90-minute game, and from the start to the end, there's that pressure to win or lose the game. I felt like when I pivoted to the career section of my life, I learned about the more sustained pressure over a long period of time. You're not under pressure for 90 minutes. It's for an entire quarter or an entire half of a year, or you're really pressured to perform over a 14-month stretch, because if you don't, you might get fired. And that's just a very different kind of pressure when people feel it every single day. They're in fight or flight all of the time. There's burnout that comes. There's things, you never get a reprieve from those things. And so there was a different side of pressure that I feel like I learned in the career section of my life than I did from the sports side of my life. And I guess where I am now, in figuring out how to serve those people better, is figuring out what kind of pressure they're in. Is this a short-term thing? Are you trying to achieve something in the short term and you got to find your balance in a day, or are you in it for the long haul? And this is you got to look at changing up some of your life actions to balance this pressure. And so I think what's come throughout my career is, I guess, just a little bit more perspective on which category people fall into, and then where the pressure is coming from as well. Is this a self-driven pressure? I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself, or are you actually feeling pressure from external sources, whether that's a boss or a manager or whatever it may be?
Yeah, it's interesting that how you make the correlation between the sports performance, sports performance pressure and then corporate performance pressure. It's there's a difference, but there's similarities. And it seems as though you've been able to identify both because of the experiences that you have, both as an athlete and working in the corporate space.
Yeah.
My question to you is, like, we talk about injury, and you talked about it earlier about like the physical aspect of not playing the game, right? That affected you, but then there was also some of that emotional and spiritual side of not playing the game. So when you start to approach your quiet arena moment, right? What does that, how does that space feel like for you? Like, what was that experience like for you when you realized, like, yo, this is really over? Like, doing it at this level, like I used to, and the dreams that I might have had to move on and go further, that's not happening. Can you kind of tap into your thought process, like what it was, and then how did you overcome it?
Yeah. So funny looking back, man. You mentioned it earlier, but like I'm getting my master's in counseling, and kind of like this like ethos that I have in my mindset is like, I want to be the counselor and the therapist that I needed at like 18, 19, 20 years old, you know? Because back then, when my playing career ended, there's this really interesting moment that happened. I don't know if you can relate to this, but when I was going into my senior season, my body was just like, it was shot. Like, it had just been through so much. I had played through so many, I mean, like, for perspective, my junior year, I played on a broken foot the entire season. Like, I mean, it's just, my body was just destroyed. And I remember like talking with my parents, talking with people close to me, like during my senior year, even though I wanted to like go play professional, I told people like, hey, after the season's over, I need like 6 weeks off. Like, let my body heal. And there was this really weird moment when I was in the hospital. Again, I had just like had this injury. I had to get like carted off the field. Like, this is the whole thing. I was in the hospital, and my parents came into the room, and they're like, how are you doing? And the first thing I said to them was, at least I get that break now, which is kind of like messed up to think about. But I did not know how to like wrap my head around the fact that not only was my playing career over, but I'm also in a lot of physical pain. I don't know how to overcome, like, it was a lot going on all at the same time. You mentioned that athlete identity foreclosure. That's also a huge passion of mine. And like, when you don't get to choose your last game, it feels really like something was taken from you. And I didn't know how to handle that. And something that I didn't realize until I was probably about 25, 26 is on the like the scale of emotions, like if it was a 1 to 10 scale, and like 7 and above is like happy and joy and fun and surprise, whatever, and then there's like those lower emotions of like sadness, disappointment, hurt, like things of that. I was really, really bad at handling those lesser emotions. I didn't acknowledge them. Like, I literally just pushed them away. I acted like everything was fine. And so it's funny, like, I don't think that I handled it in like the most graceful way.
Yeah.
I just acted like it didn't affect me. And I think if I was able to do it again, or had someone to walk alongside me that would like had been there before, I think I just would encourage myself just to sit in it a little bit longer, like actually feel like, hey, your career is over. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah.
What comes to mind? And no right or wrong answer, but just like sit in it for a second, because I mentioned it took me a long time to come back to playing. I don't think I would have waited 6 years to play again had I just sat with it the first time. And so there was this space of, because I didn't deal with it, because I didn't like just stare at it in the face, you know, I tried to run away from it. I tried to like run away from the sport. I tried to run away from like that position. And so the emotional and like spiritual side of not playing the game felt like a huge loss, because for years that had been like a coping mechanism of mine. Like, no matter what was going on in my life, I could like go onto the field, forget all about it. And there's like this healthy exchange of energy, and then just like that, it was gone, and I no longer had that. And so when I look back at like my 21 to like 23, 24, there were so many things that I like tried to like fill that void of no longer playing, and it was all just because I hadn't just sat with the disappointment and truly like the sadness that I felt of it no longer being a thing. I like refused to acknowledge that I was really heartbroken about it. if you were to talk to my mom would be like, yeah, obviously you were heartbroken. Like she could have read me like a book, but I was just like, no, I'm good. Like everything's fine. It all happens for a reason. Everything's good.
That's
like,
the mask.
and yeah. And just like acknowledging for a second, like, damn, dude, this is rough.
Yeah.
I don't think I was confident enough to say that.
Identity moratorium.
Say more about that.
Identity moratorium. The Latin word for moratorium is morari, and that's it's basically like to simplify it, it's like a timeout. It's like an identity pause. I call it the wilderness. I'm really big into scriptural references, and so like when God saved Israel from Egypt, He was telling them about this promised land. So I can only imagine they've been locked away in slavery, have to do all this stuff. And now God is like, I'm finna take y'all to the promised land. Like, ooh, before we go to the promised land. But before we do, there's a little place called the wilderness, right? Yeah. Y'all gonna be here for a little bit, right? About 40 years, right? And so it's similar to athletes, man. It's like when that game is removed, we're in the wilderness. And you know this as a psychologist that they say that it can take an athlete somewhere up to 15 years before they finally decide what their purpose is or discover what their purpose is. And so, listen, man, whether it's 6 months, 6 years, or 6 days, it doesn't matter. 6 minutes, 6 weeks, or 6 hours, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like whatever it takes for you to finally understand who you are outside of that sport, that's the win. And there's no time frame on that. So I commend you, brother, for the time that you took and the things that you had to go through in order for you to get to where you are today, because now all of that pain and that suffering and that sacrifice that you made, man, you're able to leverage that like the tip of a spear and aim that in a positive direction for a lot of guys, man. There's so many cats out here that's suffering, Henry, and I know you speak to a lot of them that are suffering and not really understanding what they're going to do after the game. I can recall having conversations with guys in the locker room at times where, their body was going through something similar to yours. It's just a lot of physical pain. Football is 100% injury sport, right?
Yeah.
Well, let me be respectful. American football.
There it is. Come on.
Right. But bodies banged up. They really mentally are probably done, but they just don't know what to do next. And so they continue to go until they can't go anymore. And they probably should have retired, 2-3 years earlier. I had a good buddy of mine who talked to me about retirement, and I thought he should do it. I was like, look, you made the money. Your family needs you, bro. And he was like, yeah, I hear you, man. I'm going to go one more year. Well, that one more year, he ended up having a severely bad concussion that ended up damaging his brain to where there was blood on his brain. Wow. And now he deals with that situation. So it's just 1 year too late, and obviously he's getting better, but those are the things that we talk about. Like just, hey, you've done what you needed to do. What's the point of doing it more? Right. It's just, I don't know what else to do. So that's why I go into the whole wilderness aspect and discovery. And for me, I believe it's better to start that process while you're in the sport. Right.
I was actually just going to say that. Like, it's funny, like over the last couple of years, I think that there's been this new wave of support for athletes post playing career, which is awesome because, prior to, let's call it like 5-ish years ago, that space didn't really exist, right? It was like you got done with playing and it was like, good luck, which is like a terrible strategy. And so over the last couple of years, like I think that has started to develop more and more and more. And I think if you were to have a crystal ball and look at what is coming in 5 years or 10 years or however long it takes, it's exactly what you're speaking of starting with players while they are still playing. It's funny with the work that we do at PAC, at Pro Athlete Community, like 75-80% of our member base are retired. They're after the game, but there is still this like 20 to 25% of our current athletes that are actively interacting with us every single day and building for what's next while they're still doing it. And it's funny, like when you talk about this transition and your readiness for transition, as I've been diving deeper into the research, there's this this researcher that I would encourage you to look into. Her last name is Schlossberg, Nancy Schlossberg, and she develops like these 4 S's of transition, and she basically assesses your readiness to transition based on these 4 S's. And the 4 S's are around the ideas of like, what does your community look like? Who is around you? Do they know you outside of being an athlete, or only when they talk to you do they talk to you about being Tony the football player, or do they ask you about being Tony the son, the father, the husband? Like, do they ask you about these things? If not, find people who will. They talk to you about like, what does your day-to-day systems look like? Is everything centered around the athletic performance, or are there other things going on? And apply this to athletic transition, apply this to your kids going off to college and now you're empty nesters. Like, there's so many different things that prepare you for your readiness for transition. But if you're doing these things actively while you're still playing, and you're starting to prime your attention and you're priming the people in your life for there is life after this game is over, you will statistically have an easier transition after. And that does not mean that it won't be difficult. It does not mean that you won't have disappointment and sadness and a missing of the game, but it does statistically mean that you will transition better and faster into what is next, not even just from a career perspective, but just from a way of being perspective, that I try to focus on a lot now with my current athletes, but also when I'm in the counseling space, when I'm working with non-athletes as well, as they are gearing up for transition, as they are figuring out what's coming next. I'm always asking, what does your life look like outside of the thing you're transitioning from? That is going to serve you so well in the space.
Yeah, listen, 1,000% agree, bro. Like that transitional period knows no gender, no race, no sex, nothing.
Yes.
Everybody, when you go from doing something and committed to something for so long, and now you have to move and pivot to something else, that is a hard space. And you're right. Like, even the research that we see now is fairly new, where we start talking about, like, we didn't even know this was a thing. Like, you're talking about 5-6 years ago. I can remember when I was playing and guys were retired, man. I remember one team I was on, it might've been the Colts in 2012. Like, dude, they were rolling guys in and rolling them out. And I saw it throughout the entire season. It's like, it was no need to try to, make friends or make connections, because it's like, dude, you might not be here next week. And that's the reality of sport. And so, when you think about what this actually is, and then the detriment that it does to the athlete afterward, man, it's sad. Which is to be honest, a lot of the things that our team is doing now, Quiet Arena, which is being able to bring people on like yourself that not only have played sport, but are actually, getting licensed in the space to be able to have the conversations, which you've just become an honorary reference partner for me, brother. So
thanks,
I didn't know if you knew that, but today you are that, right? Because I respect what you're doing, and you getting the licensing for it. But I'm very interested in this topic because I've just had so many people around me that have been suffering and not knowing why. And the more I started reading these white papers of these different psychologists and and getting in depth into what this was, man, not only the more that I start understanding the plight of my brothers and my sisters, but I also started understanding some of the things that I was dealing with.
Yes.
Which then allowed me to say, okay, now that I have the answers, I'm the type of person to where when there's a problem in my life, I immediately start to understand what the problem is, and then how do I come up with the solution? Because I'm not just going to sit in the problem, but then I get excited because I'm like, okay, if I'm dealing with this, I know I can't be the only one. So let me, go and run up the hill first and take all the hits, and then come back with the answer to give to other people. And so that's what we're doing with this podcast and bringing people like you on. And so the question that I have is, like, with you being so close to the athletes, like you mentioned, 75% of them, being retired, 25% actually playing. What do you believe now? Your opinion based off of your knowledge and studies that they're not prepared for, whether that be in the transitional space, life, economically, whatever. Like, what do you believe are some of the top things that these athletes are not prepared for when they transition out of the space?
Honestly, it's so funny. The first thing that comes to mind is your schedule, which might seem like really not the deepest thing. It might be the most on the surface thing that I could say, but like, especially when you think about like your career in the football space, and when you show up to the facility, you run through all the practice, all the film, all the meals, and then you come home with a meal like in hand, and then you go home and you might do some recovery stuff. That's your day.
Yeah.
Every day, that is your day. And maybe there's some travel in there because you're traveling to and from a game, and now all of a sudden it's over. What do you do with your time? And so, like, if you're not invested in other areas of your life as a community member, as a family member, as a friend, as a mentor, whatever it may be, literally, what do I fill my time with is something that a lot of people don't think about. And early on in this work, I was like talking with people about like put one thing on your schedule a day. And when you think about 24 hours, and let's call it, say you sleep for 8 or 9 hours or whatever it may be, if you just have one thing on your schedule, it's like, well, what do you do with all of the other time? Yeah. Sometimes it's just one thing keeps you going every single day. And so I don't think that people really think about that. And then the other thing, I think everything that you mentioned is something that I see often, which is, the financial space, the career transition space of like, there are some people that retire from sports and they're lucky enough and blessed enough to have made enough money to where they don't need to do anything, like they don't need another career. But if you aren't in that space, which is the majority of athletes, how do I talk about my skills being transferable? If you're talking to me about X's and O's on a screen for a play, I could talk to you about it all day long. But how does my football career, how does my soccer career equate to KPIs and talking through shareholder value and like cross-functional whatever? There is this knowledge gap, I think, that exists sometimes of how do I even speak to my experience in a way that's advantageous for me. I think that is there. And then there's something just around the shedding of the identity, and that's where sometimes the deep work is. And in fact, like when I started with my coaching space, I love the power of coaching. I think it's so beautiful because it deals with the here and the now. What is in the way today, and how do we get through it, and where am I going? So it's present focused and future focused. It's this amazing tool that I will do for the rest of my life. But as I was working with athletes specifically, I kept noticing that as I was doing the coaching work, there was stuff from people's past. There was trauma from people's families, their upbringings, who they had to be from a really young age. Like something that I see in the athlete space all the time is like they were their family's ticket out of wherever they were. And so when you're dealing with that level of trauma, and how do I just be without providing or whatever it may be, like that's actually what prompted me to go back to school to get my master's in counseling, because I needed to be equipped to work with the trauma that athletes are facing in their transition. And so I think that there's something in the struggle of slowing down. Your whole career has been on 1,000%, it's going 100 miles an hour and everything's like go, 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 go. And now all of a sudden you have time and space just to sit. And typically when there's time and space to sit, there are thoughts, there are feelings that come up that you've never dealt with before. And then athletes get lost because they don't know how to deal with it, because they've never been taught. And now they don't even have the community support of the locker room. So they're just like struggling in silence.
Wow.
And so those are a couple of things that I think that people deal with, athletes specifically, in the goal through the work with PAC and through the work with Carrington Coaching and Counseling is to help expose athletes to like, get in front of people, dude. Like you don't have to do this thing alone. You don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to just like walk through this thing waiting for the next day to start. Like you can be excited about your life. You can embrace your life. You can love your life. You just have to do the inner work to get there.
That's so important. I believe everything that you said is so important, but that last piece, the inner work, man, as athletes, you come to realize how vulnerable we actually are, because when it comes to pushing our bodies and pushing our minds in a space that operates in physicality, there's nothing like us. It's warrior minded, man. We'll play on broken feet for a season. We'll take shots. We'll hold off surgeries. We'll walk out there with one arm. We'll do whatever it takes to battle. Until it's time to battle intrinsically with you versus you, that battle right there, I've seen it make, I don't want to use the word coward, but I've seen people cower down to fighting that battle, because it's one that you can't punch. It's one that you can't outlift. You can't outrun. It's something that's you sitting in the darkness with you. And a lot of people have an issue with doing that, man. So I appreciate
they don't have the tools, and that's the thing. It's like they don't have the tools to do it. Like,
Yeah.
I said something really early on in this conversation, which is like, throughout my life with my mentors in my life, I'm really good at introspection. I'm really good at looking within and say, like, what is my hand in all of this? Like, how do I need to grow? How do I need to whatever? But there are times that I can't see it, bro. It's a blind spot. Like, I don't know how to handle it, which is when I bring in those mentors or therapists or people to give me a new tool to process through what I'm going through. And like, I say this in the therapy room, I can't even tell you how many times a week. You might be exceptional with a hammer. You might be the best hammerer this side of the Mississippi. You might be a world-class hammerer. You might be facing a situation that needs a screwdriver. No matter how good you are with a hammer, it's not a screwdriver. Yeah. So like, you gotta learn a new tool. And so like, I think you're spot on, where people can't outrun it, they can't outjump it, they can't push past it. Right. And up to this point, like, athletes have been reinforced over and over and over and over. If there is something to push through, you'll do it with strength. You'll do it with like with holding pain. You'll do it with that suffering in silence mentality. Because if you tell the coach, if you tell the guys in the locker room that, oh yeah, I'm just like not feeling it today, whatever, like you get looked down upon. So the thought of like exposing yourself as a former athlete, that I'm dealing with some of these things, it makes you feel weak. It makes you feel cowardly. As some people say, you may not say it, I'll say it. Like, it makes people feel cowardly. And so, yeah, it's like they have the willingness to do it, they don't have the tool to do it. And so that's where I feel like these conversations, whether it's in the therapy room or at PAC or whatever organization you affiliate yourself with, learning skill sets and learning tools to really practically move through this stuff is sometimes life-changing and life-saving. And without having the sincerity in the conversation that like, hey, this shit is hard. And unless you treat it like a workout, it is a mental workout. Unless you treat it that way, you're gonna lose.
That's so good. Well, Henry, man, listen, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your wisdom. I know that the people that will watch this, that are experiencing all of the things that we talked about today, at least today, they'll be able to have a roadmap on where to start because of everything that you've been able to share with us. And so we have a signature question that we always ask our guests, and it goes like this. So, when the arena goes quiet, what part of you remains that the game could never take, and what are you building with it now?
Man, I get chills thinking about it. Being a husband and a father, bro.
Man, I love
like
that.
I as you can imagine, I introduce myself to a lot of people all the time. I'm talking to people all the time, and what I always say is like, here are the things I've done, but the most important thing you need to know about me is that I'm a husband and a father. It is the best part of me, is my favorite two hats that I wear, and no matter what I go through, like, those two things will be there the most. And when you ask me about like what I'm building with it, it's everything I'm doing. I can't even tell you how proud I am to be a husband to my wife. My wife is a beautiful, creative, loving human being that inspires me every single day, and I feel lucky to call her my wife. And our daughter, like, I can't even imagine how she's going to be in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. She's 8 months old right now, and she's already the light of our life. And I really believe that like my impact on this world will be through my family. And so when it goes quiet like that, that's what will never be taken from me.
Man, I love that, brother. Appreciate you, man, for sharing that. And shout out to the family, man. Shout out to the missus, to that beautiful baby girl. Listen, this is your time, man. Is there anything that you want to plug? How can the people get in touch with you? You go off, man. This is your time.
Thanks, bro. On all of my socials, it's at Henry Wynd. You find me through there. And my coaching business and my counseling practice is Carrington Coaching and Counseling. And I'm building on that. And if you're a professional athlete, current or former pro, you can also find me at Pro Athlete Community. It's the work that I love, what I get to do every single day. But I'm so grateful to be on here, and thank you to you for providing the space to have me, and looking forward to the next time.
Absolutely, man. Well, listen, everybody, that's my man, Henry, man. He, as you know, he rocked the house. So look, if you're an athlete that's struggling in the transitional space, purpose alignment, identity, make sure that you go to the quietarenapodcast.com. I want you to join the Athlete Circle community. This is our community where we'll be bringing in guests like Henry to come in and drop some more knowledge. If you love what you heard today, we're going to go a little bit more in depth in that community. Also, you want to make sure that you get the merch that matches the message. Go ahead and cop your Quiet Arena stuff. We're building this platform for athletes from an athlete, right? And listen, it's always important to understand this. Your sport is your platform. It is not your purpose. And as long as you understand that, then you're on the right path to being able to build that identity outside of that. This has been the Quiet Arena. Thank you for joining. Thank you for coming to the locker room. It is your man, Tony the Tycoon. I'm out.
Living legend, lethal weapon, mastermind, never tried, tell 'em all.